Empty hospitals being labelled war zones and deaths from other causes being fraudulently rebranded as COVID-19. Those are the claims of an NHS whistleblower. Sai will be joining me in the studio. He is a former director of end-of-life care at one of the UK's largest health trusts. He will be sharing his story. It's not to be missed. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Gareth Icke Tonight. For 3 years, we've been pointing out the weaknesses in the official story of the pandemic. The ludicrous videos of people dropping dead on the streets of China, the coffins lined up in Italy that was actually from 2013, the sick people gasping for breath in India that were taken after a gas leak years previously, the TikTok dancing nurses in war zone hospitals, the fraudulent PCR test and its over-amplification that its inventor said would find almost anything in anybody. The fact Dr. Fauci admitted that at 35 cycles of amplification, the test was useless. Yet we knew countries, countless across the world, including the UK, were using up to 46 cycles. Labelling deaths of any cause as COVID within 28 days of an assumed positive diagnosis, to the point where in one county in Colorado, 2 out of 5 COVID deaths had gunshot wounds. A builder in Croatia fell 10 foot from a ladder and caved his head in, and the doctor said COVID had got him. The financial incentives handed to hospitals to put people on ventilators that would almost certainly kill them. The use of behavioural scientists and psychologists to influence government policy, bribing people to stay at home while their businesses went under, banning parents from being with their dying children in their final moments. That's not about protecting anyone. That's just barbaric. The gaslighting, the intimidation, the demonisation of anyone that wasn't buying the propaganda hook, line and sinker. The repeated claims of safe and effective. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Lies, lies and more stinking lies. It was a monumental scam, and all the while we were asking ourselves, where are the whistleblowers on the inside that will blow the lid off this once and for all? Because if we know this is nonsense, and it is nonsense, they must know, because they're in it. How could you honestly look at yourself, look at your kids, and continue to perpetrate the lie that will ultimately claim you and yours as its victim in the end? How indeed. Our guest today is an NHS whistleblower. He uses the name Sai and is a former NHS director of end-of-life care for one of the biggest trusts in the UK. Sai wrote a Twitter thread explaining his experiences within hospitals that we were told were overrun with COVID patients, and the change in diagnosis that lumped several different types of pneumonia together and simply labelled them COVID-19. As you can imagine, the thread went viral, and we're very happy to welcome Sai to the studio here in Derby. Thanks for joining us, mate.
In terms of medical certification, when you're writing what killed a person, I think because it was regulated under one person as opposed to before, it was multiple treating doctors that came down to determine what killed their patient. Whereas now the government implemented a system where one person was effectively controlling that. Thereby you have one person that can write whatever they want. And so I think if you're being paid by the government and you're in that role, you would have an incentive. You're getting paid and you would follow whatever instruction there was. People that I actually managed, for example, my mentor, she was kept away in the dark, wasn't allowed to see all certificates that previously she would be allowed to see. So you have to question why that actually happened. The NHS is a system where you don't challenge authority.
Okay.
And that's just how it is. If someone gives you an instruction, it's very rare that someone will challenge it. Especially from a clinical perspective. From an administrative perspective, I could definitely challenge it because there's no risk. Whereas nurses are regulated by a nursing body.
Right.
Doctors are regulated by the GMC. If you misbehave, you're going to be essentially, told off, disciplined in a sense. It's not going to be easy for you to speak out and challenge. That's how the culture is.
Do you think that's why a lot of people haven't, maybe? Because
I think they want to.
They're aware that basically their career is done.
Yeah,
and they've got
for sure.
I
can speak on perspective of doctors because I've got close friends and a lot of my friends are doctors, and I know that they think something is wrong, but it's very difficult. And I do understand the situation that they're in because they've got mouths to feed. They've got mortgage to pay. for you to then sacrifice 5 years of medicine studying in university and then going through the hospital system where you've trained, you've worked nights, 12-hour shifts, no food sometimes, and you see something wrong, it takes a person to be on the right side of morality to speak out.
Yeah.
And not everyone has that. Okay, so pre-pandemic, highest cause of death in the UK, and I can speak for the UK alone, is pneumonia. And the reason being is because there's 4 different conditions.
Right.
And that is aspiration pneumonia, community-acquired pneumonia, hospital-acquired pneumonia, and bronchopneumonia. And these 4 diseases kill a large number of people. When you add them all up together, they kill the highest number of people annually pre-pandemic.
Right.
What happened was during the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, you've then changed to a system where one person is writing every single certificate. And so all those pneumonia deaths were probably being interpreted as COVID-19 deaths. So automatically you have 4 conditions that had different numbers of deaths being branched into one. So you've got a high cause death rate already. Plus you've got the PCR testing system, which was implemented. So every single patient coming into a hospital was being tested and not tested twice, which is key. If tested again, there was a high likelihood that they're going to be negative. And there's scientific evidence to show that there's a 90% false positive rate. So if you test again, very likely that they're going to be negative. But the NHS has a policy to say, we take the first test. If it's positive, it stays on the patient's system for the entire admission.
So they then get chucked in the COVID ward, chucked on remdesivir.
Not necessarily, but the key is you've now got patients that come in with diseases that we see on a regular basis, like myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack. You have strokes, you have hemorrhages, you have your cancers that come into a hospital. And when these patients die of these diseases, all it takes is that positive test.
And it's on the death
And if they die, which is a regular thing, and it happens, a lot of people die. People come into hospital, Gareth, and die of old age. It's something that was regularly seen every week in a hospital. That role that I did, Gareth, was a locum role. So I left a permanent job, and that's quite a big thing to do.
Yeah.
Leaving your permanent role to take a locum job. But I did it because I wanted to see. And after I did that, I saw so much that I left, but my CV was with the agency.
Right.
And I got a call not long ago after writing the thread asking me if I wanted a job to do with vaccination of children, to increase the uptake of vaccines amongst children because it's not being taken up much. And as you can imagine, I listened to it and said, no, thank you. I'm good, thanks. But yeah, you mentioned that and it's interesting because it's definitely on the agenda, isn't it?
100%. Yeah.
And it's scary, And when you tell your friends who have kids because you care about them and they don't believe you or they mock and stuff, what can you do? You're doing it out of love because you care for someone and they don't see it that way and they mock you or, crack jokes, which is funny. I laugh along with them.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's they're potentially at harm here.